Dark skies over Africa. Italian bombers roar across the Ethiopian highlands, releasing deadly clouds of poison gas. Below, Ethiopian soldiers, armed with rifles from another century, stand defiantly. This was not just a war, it was a clash between modern imperial ambition and an ancient kingdom that refused to bow. In 1935, Benito Mussolini's fascist Italy launched a brutal invasion of Ethiopia, one of the last independent nations in Africa. To Mussolini, conquering Ethiopia was more than territorial expansion. It was revenge. Nearly 40 years earlier, in 1896, Italy had been humiliated at the Battle of Adwa, where Ethiopian warriors shattered European expectations by defeating a modern colonial army. That Adwa humiliation haunted Italy for decades, and Mussolini was determined to erase it with fire, steel, and gas. But this war was more than just Italy versus Ethiopia. It was a test of the world order created after World War I. The League of Nations, established to prevent aggression, faced its greatest challenge. Would the international community stop Mussolini's conquest? Or would appeasement and fear pave the way for even greater wars? At the heart of this tragedy stood Emperor Haile Selassie, a monarch who carried not only the fate of his nation, but the hopes of an entire continent. His voice would echo across the world, warning of the dangers of unchecked fascism. His prophecy, ignored at the time, would prove hauntingly accurate. This is the story of the Second Italo-Ethiopian War, a war of vengeance, betrayal, forgotten atrocities, and a warning that the world failed to heed. The roots of the Second Italo-Ethiopian War reach far deeper than Mussolini's speeches or fascist propaganda. To understand why Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935, we must return to the late 19th century. In 1896, at the Battle of Adwa, Ethiopian warriors under Emperor Menelik II inflicted a stunning defeat on Italian forces. For the first time in modern history, a European colonial army had been crushed by an African power. Ethiopia's victory was celebrated across the continent and became a beacon of hope for oppressed peoples worldwide. But for Italy, Adwa was not just a military defeat, it was a national humiliation. Generations of Italian leaders carried the scar of that loss, and Mussolini, obsessed with building a new Roman Empire, vowed to avenge it. By the 1930s, Mussolini's fascist regime was desperate for glory. Italy lagged behind Britain and France in overseas colonies. While London controlled vast regions from Egypt to South Africa, and Paris ruled over North and West Africa, Rome possessed only a thin strip of land in Eritrea, Libya, and Italian Somaliland. Mussolini needed a conquest to rally his people, prove the strength of fascism, and elevate Italy's status among the great powers. Ethiopia, independent, relatively isolated, and surrounded by Italian territories, became the perfect target. Propaganda in Italy painted the invasion as a civilizing mission, claiming the Ethiopians were backward and in need of Rome's guidance. But behind the rhetoric lay raw ambition: to avenge Adwa, to control the Horn of Africa, and to provide Mussolini with his empire. Thus, Ethiopia stood on the brink, not because of its own actions, but because Mussolini needed a war to secure his legacy. And once again, the fate of this proud African kingdom would be tested on the battlefield. On October 3, 1935, Italian forces crossed the Ethiopian border from Eritrea in the north and from Italian Somaliland in the southeast. Mussolini unleashed nearly 500,000 troops, supported by tanks, modern artillery, and a powerful air force. In contrast, Ethiopia's army, though numerically large, was poorly equipped. Many soldiers carried spears, swords, or outdated rifles, some dating back to the late 19th century. It was truly a collision between modern mechanized warfare and traditional resistance. At first, Ethiopian forces attempted to resist with courage and determination. In the north, Ras Imru Haile Selassie led fierce defenses, while in the south, Ras Desta Damto fought to halt the Italian advance. Battles like those at Amba Aradam in the Tembian Mountains showed the Ethiopians' willingness to fight against overwhelming odds. Yet bravery alone could not close the technological gap. Italian aircraft bombed villages, supply lines, and even hospitals. Most infamously, Mussolini authorized the use of mustard gas, an outlawed chemical weapon from World War I, dropped from planes onto soldiers and civilians alike. Entire communities were poisoned. Despite international outrage, Italy pressed forward. By March 1936, Ethiopian defenses had crumbled under relentless bombardment. In early May, Italian troops marched into the capital, Addis Ababa. Emperor Haile Selassie, refusing to surrender, went into exile, determined to continue the struggle through diplomacy. For Mussolini, the victory was swift and decisive, far easier than the humiliating defeat at Adwa 4 decades earlier. Rome celebrated, declaring the birth of the Italian Empire. But behind the triumphal parades lay a war marked by atrocities, civilian suffering, and the shameful use of chemical weapons. It was less a war than a brutal demonstration of fascist might against a nation fighting simply to remain free. The Second Italo-Ethiopian War was not fought in silence. Around the world, newspapers carried images of Ethiopian villages reduced to ashes, of civilians scarred by chemical burns, and of Mussolini boasting of his empire. The war was a direct challenge to the League of Nations, the international body created after World War I to prevent such acts of aggression. In theory, Ethiopia should have been protected. It was a member of the League, and Mussolini's invasion was a clear violation of its charter. Emperor Haile Selassie appealed to Geneva, demanding collective action against Italy. The League condemned Rome's aggression and imposed economic sanctions. But the sanctions were timid and incomplete. Italy was barred from selling certain goods, but the League refused to restrict oil, steel, and coal, resources essential for Mussolini's war machine. Nor did Britain and France close the Suez Canal, the vital artery that allowed Italian troops and supplies to flow easily into East Africa. Why such hesitation? Because Britain and France feared driving Mussolini into an alliance with Adolf Hitler. They hoped to keep Italy on their side against Germany, and so they chose appeasement over principle. In effect, the League of Nations revealed itself as powerless, able to condemn but unwilling to act. The clearest voice of warning came from Haile Selassie himself. In June 1936, he traveled to Geneva and delivered a speech that electrified the chamber. With dignity and sorrow, he denounced the use of poison gas and declared, "It is us today. It will be you tomorrow." His prophecy would prove hauntingly accurate. The world had been warned of the rising tide of fascism, but no one listened. Italy's victory in Ethiopia was celebrated in Rome with parades, banners, and the triumphant declaration of Mussolini's new Roman Empire. But behind the propaganda lay a far darker reality. The war had not only crushed Ethiopia's independence, it had unleashed a wave of atrocities rarely remembered in mainstream history. From the very beginning, Mussolini's army employed tactics that violated every standard of civilized warfare. Poison gas was dropped not only on soldiers, but on villages, crops, and rivers, contaminating the land for years. Civilians fleeing into the mountains were hunted down by aircraft, while Red Cross hospitals marked with clear symbols were deliberately bombed. Estimates suggest that over 250,000 Ethiopians, soldiers and civilians, perished in less than a year of fighting. The suffering did not end with the military defeat. Once Addis Ababa fell, the Italian occupation was brutal. Resistance movements sprang up across the countryside, and Mussolini responded with ruthless reprisals. Entire villages were massacred in collective punishment. The most infamous episode came in February 1937, when Italian troops carried out mass killings in Addis Ababa after an attempted assassination of the Italian viceroy. Thousands of civilians were slaughtered in just 3 days, yet the conquest brought Mussolini only temporary prestige. Italy's East African empire proved fragile, plagued by guerrilla resistance and overstretched resources. When World War II broke out, Ethiopia became a battleground once again. By 1941, with the help of British and Allied forces, Haile Selassie returned in triumph to his capital. Ethiopia regained its sovereignty, but the scars of occupation and war would linger for generations. The atrocities of 1935 and 1936 stand as one of the earliest examples of fascist brutality on a mass scale, an ominous preview of what Europe and the world would soon endure under Mussolini and Hitler. Thank you for respecting history. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and write the bell so you don't miss any battles.